Hello, I am Lava Canyon. What is the Black Omen? Easy. The Black Omen is effectively the remnant archaeology of the Undersea Palace after having been destroyed during the fight with Lavos. Using the dreams of Lavos and Green Zeal intertwined through the help of the Mammon Machine, the palace floats into the sky similar to the Zeal Islands and into the Black Omen, or Black Dream as some call it, materializing into the timeline, being treated like it was there since 12,000 BC. In the main timeline, the Black Omen is being used by Queen Zeal to slowly suck up the life force of the world, hovering above it for over 13,000 years, able to have the energy to do so mainly because of Lavos. Pretty sure. Is that your final answer? Well, before you answer, I want this video to be a concise guide on the arguments for the other possibilities. Mainly being, is the Black Omen a flat ship or a tall tower? Take a good look at this sprite and make a decision of what it looks like to you. It is quite common for sprites from 2D games to have misinterpretations, small pixels looking like eyes, or colors being reused for a different thing. Sprites are difficult to make unmistakable. In order to get the true representation, you would need to take a look at the official concept art. Even other sprites from Chrono Trigger have misinterpretations. The horns on the first boss of the game, Yakra, kinda sorta almost look like eyes from far away. I don't know what it is about horns in games looking like eyes. The shapes make them look very mangled. It happens a lot, but the thing that makes the Black Omen different from these is that it has no official concept art to glean from. The sprite is all we have. It is not possible to officially tell what is the misinterpretation and what is the true representation. So let's look at the details of the Black Omen. When considering the Omen as a ship of horizontal length, it becomes the largest dungeon in the overworld map. Appropriate, being that it's the final dungeon of the game. There are a couple of sections to the Omen, some elevators and teleporters. The teleporters could be sending to the same floor, but the longest line without interruptions works up to roughly 253 tiles in length. That would be around 36 tiles per tile in the overworld sprite. The ship theory would assume the sprite is the length, so does this match up to other areas in the game? Well, suffice to say, there is not much consistency with that in each map, but let's humor this anyways with a couple of examples. Guardia Forest takes up 2 tiles in the overworld, the map itself being about 47 tiles, so the comparison is 23 tiles per overworld tile. A bit smaller. The Protodome is 30 tiles per overworld tile, closer. The Forest Maze is 24 tiles per overworld tile. With these, the average would be 25, I think. So it's not exact, but if we use the tower interpretation, the tile per tile calculation would be even larger at 63. So technically, the ship version is closer to the average. But there are other maps that can get you to the tower length. There are a couple of places that take just 1 tile, the longest one of these being the Zeal Palace, and that is 64 tiles long per tile. Just 1 over the 63 of the tower version of the Black Omen. So what does this say? Honestly, effectively jack all. I did say the consistency of the overworld maps was bonkers, and this just further imprints that. The Omen is the longest in length of all the maps, but what about height? Well, there are a couple of floors, like 3 maybe, that you traverse. However, there is an elevator that you use to move floors. This elevator is used as a battlefield with a couple of enemy waves. During these battles, the elevator is moving. It looks rad, awesome background effect for your fights, and works as a cool transition period to the next phase of the dungeon. But it moves the entire time, waiting for the battles to end, so there is no physical end to it. It could, in theory, go on forever. However, you can skip the battles, and it will still move. This theoretical lowest amount of floors would be 18. You may be able to do 9 if you double the height of the floors. The room with the Mammon machine feels like one that would need to be pretty high, but it's still a lot of floors. I believe the largest mountain in the game is the Dactyl Nest at 7 floors, and those do be small floors. So that actually does check out pretty significantly. I would say it's a point for tower, but you want to know something really funny? Just a little bit funny. If it's to be assumed that you enter the little prongs at the front of the sprite, working out because the entrance starts with an outside bridge, that would mean you start at the bottom of the tower version of the Omen. The elevator goes down. It goes down. Come on, why does it go down? Why does it go down? It's not like this helps it for the ship version either, but I'm having real trouble wrapping my mind around it. It's a little strange. I would think that if the developers wanted it to be a tower, they'd want you to go up it like it's a gauntlet. However, in terms of just physical space itself, you could, for one, assume the heroes start at the top. Weird idea. But right before the elevator in the Omen is a teleporter. The teleporter could literally send you anywhere, so why not the top? I guess so, and not soon after there's another teleporter, so who knows where you are going. The second elevator in the Black Omen does go up, and there is a teleporter before and after. It's total nuts, you're just being taken up and down and all around. It feels like I'm going through circles. However, I do think it's very weird for game design reasons that it would make you go all over the place if it were meant to be a tower. For being a ship, this would matter less. It do be tall though, both the longest dungeon and the tallest. So I don't know how to point this one. What else? Well, the shadow of the sprite is a point for ship, I think. Because the shadow mimics the shape of the Omen. The shape could be done if the sun was shining in front of it, however, the shadow does not move with Omen, and that would only work if it were top down. If the shadow is to be believed, that would mean the Omen is bobbing up and down, rather than side to side. Doesn't really mean anything, but it may be difficult to tell otherwise. How about the engines? No matter what, if it's flying, then it should have engines. Or, well, maybe. The Zeal Islands didn't. But visually speaking, if it were to be a vertical tower, the engines would be vertical as well. They should be vertical. If they are horizontal, that means they'd be facing up. That being said, you could simply say the engines are vertical, but the rest is not. The game does this perspective mixing all the time. And on that subject, using the overworld sprites is basically a lost cause. The map is at an angle while showing the flat ground appropriately. Both ship and tower versions would visually fit the overworld art style. What? What are you saying? The engines are actually eyes? What? Oh, it's the cicada gang again. Get out of here! Shoot! Shoot! We talked general structure of the Black Omen. But there is something weird at the very end of this area. During the boss fight with Zeal, you are at this point of the Omen. It would make sense to assume this is the top, but its structure actually has an equivalent on the overworld sprite. And that equivalent is here, on the middle of the Omen. This comparison image illustrates this pretty well. There is space behind it too. If it were a tower, wouldn't you be able to see the rest of it in the background? This is a pretty good strong point for ship, though I do find it very odd that it shows space in the background in the first place. Is the Black Omen really that high up? I did do the game design aspect against the tower, but I could totally see the game design aspect of showing the Earth from so high up as a deliberate way to convey how massive the thing is. Maybe they're even somewhat self-aware and use that to show how truly tall it is. The middle does match the final segment, but in terms of scale, it completely messes up the consistency entirely. I mean, it's like 4x2 tiles big, and it takes up just one screen inside the map. If you tried to be consistent, the boss screen would only be like 8 pixels wide. So if you went for tower version, you could just assume the middle as unrelated or part of the general architectural pattern. This whole Black Omen thing isn't a common question, however in the few conversations there are of it online, I've seen both sides reference their own things that the Black Omen may be based on. For the ship, people forward to the ship in Star Wars, the Star Destroyer, as a reference. This checks out pretty well as the Star Destroyer also has a prominent middle section. Good place for a boss fight. For the tower, however, an interesting parallel that people show for it is the Ancient Vimana. Vimanas are tall, ancient flying aircrafts from Hindu mythology, or in other words, they're floating towers. Hovering around in the sky for long periods of time, the reference is pretty apt. So that's interesting. One is referencing pop culture, while the other is referencing ancient mythology. So the path is clear, I think. How often does Chrono Trigger reference pop culture versus ancient mythology? Starting with pop culture, there is a reference to famous musicians with the Megas trio, being Slash for Guns N' Roses, Flea for Red Hot Chili Peppers, and Ozzy for just Ozzy Osbourne himself. So how many more are there? Actually, we need to halt this immediately, because there is actually a pretty significant disconnect with the name-related references. Many of these were done at the discretion of Ted Woolsey, who is the English translator of the Super Nintendo version. He took many liberties for the localization. Many of these were awesome. For example, Frog in the Japanese version talked very straightforward and normal, while in the English version, he is written with an accent. In the Japanese version, Ozzy, Slash, and Flea were named the equivalent of vinegar, soy sauce, and mayonnaise. An uncomfortably common trend in Japan, naming characters after food like they are edible. So we must look at references that were also in the Japanese original, where the brainchild of the Black Omen came from. I'm gonna just ramble a little bit. I feel like all of 2300 would have to be inspired by sci-fi movies. Mother Brain is a classic computer program having a god complex plot, right? A loose inspiration, not really a direct reference. I mean, the whole game is very sci-fi for the most part. The whole having time travel thing. It's likely the creators watched many sci-fi stuff, but I don't know. There is a Kafka laugh, is a reference to Square's own games that feels a bit rough as well. I played this whole game for this video, the whole entire game for this video, to get a fresh memory, but all I really had was the musicians. Not looking, but let's just come back to that later. So, for mythological references, there's tons of Greek mythology. The name of the game literally has a Greek word in it. The Hydroconda enemy is half based on a Greek creature. There is an item named Siren's Kiss, with Siren being Greek, and this is a direct translation. Robo's original name, Prometheus, is a Greek giant who defied the gods to assist humans. Honestly, that reference is pretty apt. Atropos, the pink Robo, is also a Greek god. Christianity would have a couple as well. Though similar to the Magus trio, the Guru trio only are references to the three wise men in the translation. Wah wah. Magus is referred to as a demon or as a savior by the mystics, though these were censored by the translation, but the original is what we are looking for, so this works. The Mammon Machine in Japanese is also called the Demon Machine. The church is very Christian in nature, using stained glass as an aesthetic symbol. I was hoping to find Hindi references, but the Kali Blade and the Shiva Edge were English translations. Just wanting you to go through my journey of getting really excited just to find out that it's just Ted Woolsey's work. That's how it goes, I suppose. Overall, though, that is a solid bit above the pop culture references. Just a bit of rambling about my researching, but there is this one pretty cool reference actually. I got really excited when I found out what seemed like a very solid reference to Star Wars. A true holy grail. In Norstein Beckler's Tent of Horrors at the Millennial Fair, during the Follow the Ball minigame, the three guys shown name themselves as Biggs, Wedge, and Pete. There are characters named Biggs and Wedge in the Star Wars Episode 4, and Pete in Episode 5, which would be a perfect 3-node point of reference. The reason I'm not much excited anymore is because we already ruled out Ted Woolsey's Rampage. Unfortunately, it can't be used. Would have been pretty great though. But alas, it only really works as something we can use if it came from the original Japanese. Got ya. Got ya. Look, I got ya. Wanna know something even funnier? Akira Toriyama, the art designer, the designer of the art, happens to be a really big fan of Star Wars. Oh yeah, but the mythology references are pretty large as well. The game has a church. Cool story, bro. So yeah, the Star Destroyer is a very solid reference, although the Vimana in general were like the original aircrafts in mythology, and aircrafts and floating islands are very common in the Final Fantasy games. Vimanas were secretly very influential to a ton of media. Now, those are the things both ship and tower can equally tug at. There are a couple of smaller tidbits to mention though. When you defeat Queen Zeal on the Black Omen, the Omen disintegrates and merges into Lavos, I guess. It merges into the ground anyways. It's a whole thing, but the animation itself? Take a glance. It starts with the bottom first, then the top after. It goes down into the sea. I would think that the ship version would disappear all at once. So this makes more sense as a tower, as this would be expected for that version. The next tidbit is that the Black Omen is supposed to be the transformation of the Undersea Palace, so what can be gleaned from that area? Well, it does have an elevator as well, but aside from that, it's very different structurally. This is what it looks like in the overworld without filters. I'll admit, this does kinda look like a Vimana with the layered steps, but it's also very wide. In general though, the layout completely changes when it becomes a Black Omen. But pause the video and ponder its design a little bit. Listen to the Undersea Palace theme while doing so, probably my favorite song in the game. Real banger, that one. So, to list all of the points for the ship or tower. For the ship you have the shadow copying the shape, the many long and wide areas in the dungeon, engines being more of a ship thing, the boss fight arena matching the middle of the overworld sprite with only space behind it, and the similarities to the Star Destroyer with the art design of being a very big fan of Star Wars. For the tower version you have the elevator, it being shown in space showing that it is very tall. After being destroyed, it disintegrates bottom first. The Undersea Palace overworld sprite looks like a multi-floor complex. And the similarities to the Vimana with Square having big aircrafts in many of their other games. So it's 5 for 5. Some points better than others, but I'll let you be the judge of that. Huh? What's that? What is that? The eyes, it has eyes, it's a bug, it's a cicada, it's a cicada, it's a cicada, it's a casada. No, not you again. Now you're gonna get it. Well, what can I say? I hope I have illustrated the mystery of the Black Omen concisely enough. But for now, the inquiry cannot be answered. It's purely open to interpretation. We'll just have to wait till Chrono Cross gets released for all of these mysteries to be solved.
Over the decades, there have been many sightings of the strange object, but no one knows why it's up there floating in space. All reports from US, Russia, and Europe in general say the satellite is of unknown origin.
Time for my exclusive YouTube end slate. It's not a blessing, it's a curse. Go to my Odysee channel to watch my videos without end slates. You know, Chrono Trigger is a pretty good game. I mean, that's pretty obvious, but this playthrough I did for this video is actually the first time I fully played through the game from start to finish. I was never really a big fan of RPGs gameplay-wise, but I've been getting into the genre a bit more lately. I played through Mother 3 not too long ago. Kingdom Hearts is an action RPG which is a bit more my jam, but I played through the first game and the second game for the first time this year. A more overshadowed but great part of Chrono Trigger for me is the trial. I never truly understood how much the game keeps track of your actions, and that scene really was the introduction to how this game experience was going to pave out. I mean, most RPGs are pretty big on changing the story around your actions, but Chrono Trigger is real ahead of its time on that aspect, in tons of aspects. I mean, is it as good as Sudoku? It's hard to say, but it's a really good game. So, more scripts being made, probably we'll move on to other rando things on the way. Download the telesystem, that is all.